The roguelike genre has come a long way. What used to be a niche part of the indie gaming scene for gamers looking for a challenge has evolved into one of the most common design philosophies in all of gaming today. These games utilize procedurally generated experiences with so many different variables that no two playthroughs will be the same. I didn't know this until recently, but the terms roguelike and roguelite, which can be easily confused with each other, are referencing a game called Rogue from the 80s. Long story short, it's one of the first successful games that utilized permanent death. No checkpoints. Once you die, your run is done. It wasn't until much later that you started seeing the term roguelite being thrown around, which just means that you still have permadeath, but there's usually some form of progress that carries over, like a skill, or maybe you get access to something that makes your future runs easier. The earliest roguelite I can remember playing was FTL, released on Steam in 2012. A short but challenging game that encourages replayability by rewarding you with different ships to try and beat the game with the more you play it. Some of the more popular ones in recent years have been games like Enter the Gungeon, Rogue Legacy, and more recently, Hades. Given the nature of these games, it wasn't common for them to have any kind of narrative until more recently. After all, how are you going to have any kind of narrative where the main point of the game is that you always have to start over when you lose? Hades was the first example of a roguelike with a fantastic narrative because, well, you're already in hell. The entire concept is perfect for a narrative-driven roguelite experience. When you die, you just start right back where you started. And I don't see how future games in this genre are going to be able to have a narrative unless it's something very similar to what I just described. I'll be honest though, I never thought I'd see the day where I'd be looking at a successful roguelite, not only made by a AAA developer, but a roguelite that is right now the best exclusive game on the PlayStation 5. I'm talking about Housemarque's most popular game yet, Returnal. Housemarque is a developer that's found a pretty comfortable place in the indie gaming scene since 1995. Many of their games are frantic shoot-em-ups with old-school arcade elements like enemy projectiles filling up the screen and crazy power-ups for the player. Good examples of this are Resogun and Dead Nation. Not smash hit games by any means, but they were fun yet solid distractions. That's why Returnal shocked everyone when it first showed up on everyone's radar. The PlayStation 5 had only 2 exclusives at launch. One was a sequel, but not really, more like a DLC thing to Spider-Man, and one was a remake of Demon's Souls, which is cool, sure, but Sony desperately needed an exclusive experience to draw gamers over to buying a PlayStation 5 instead of the seemingly much easier to acquire next-generation Xboxes. That's why Sony was happy to publish Returnal. So happy that they decided to go all in with Housemarque when Sony purchased the development studio not too long after Returnal's release. It's essentially putting a ring on an already great relationship between two companies, and after playing Returnal, it's easy to see why Sony decided to take this relationship to the next level. Returnal has you playing as a lone explorer in space named Celine. The very start of the game shows you crash landing on a strange planet. At the crash site, Celine is unable to contact anyone, so she leaves her ship behind and begins looking for a way off this planet while figuring out as much as she can about this undiscovered world. It's not too long before she runs into a corpse wearing the same kind of spacesuit as hers. Okay, so other explorers like her have been here before? That's good, right? She begins examining the body only to realize, holy smokes, that's her! As she continues continues to examine her surroundings, she realizes there are tons of her bodies laying around here. Next to her corpse is an audio log, which is totally normal. I also record audio logs of my thoughts and leave them in random locations around my home. And if you aren't, I recommend you do as well. You never know. I'm sure you've found yourself in many situations where you can't remember something and then you're like, man, I wish I wrote that down or had a recording of it. This is how you can stay on top of things like that. Poop Bro Life Hack number 328.
Scout log. Atropos. Elapsed time, 30 minutes since last crash. Whole areas of this forest are rearranging themselves like a fluid puzzle after each of my... Whenever I return, per Astra protocol, I will not be recovered until I reach the broadcast signal. If you're hearing this, you are stuck here too.
It won't be long until you inevitably meet your end, and just like the audio log hinted at, you are returned to the crash site. You don't know why, but you are stuck here. No matter how many times you die, Celine is trapped in this decrepit extraterrestrial hell where time is like a flat circle. But she's very far from alone. The planet is swarming with aliens that all want you dead. But Celine is up to the challenge. She quickly realizes her pistol is now some kind of alien laser gun, and she can utilize many different kinds of unique weapons she discovers on the planet to her advantage as well. In true roguelite fashion, all of the weapons come in many different varieties. You may find a rocket launcher that is fully automatic, or a pistol that fires homing missiles alongside its regular bullets. And even though you have to start over every time you die, the more you play, the more potential upgrades you earn for all your weapons. It's one of the most satisfying parts of the game when you find a really good weapon that just turns a room full of baddies into Swiss cheese. The game is meant to be challenging, but it does reward successful play. Every 3 kills you get without taking damage rewards you with an adrenaline level up. You can get up to adrenaline level 5, which, let's just say, if you can stay at level 5, your weapon is going to be cooking. Each adrenaline level makes your gun more effective. The goal is to stay at adrenaline level 5 for as long as possible. The first thing I noticed about gameplay is that Celine moves really fast, which is good because you'll be dropped into a large and new randomly generated dungeon every time you die. And you'll be rewarded for backtracking during your runs when you find keys that can be used to open locked doors and chests. The game's traversal also has a Metroidvania element to it. Certain upgrades you gain are permanent and let you do things like go underwater, or my personal favorite, Batman grapple gun yourself around the map, especially during combat, which can look like a 3D bullet hell at times. You'll be running from a hail of gunfire from one group of flying enemies as you jump over a wall of lasers being shot at you by a completely different group of turret enemies from your peripheral. It's overwhelming, but that's why the game incentivizes exploration with tons of different ways you can upgrade your suit, but only temporarily for the run. Some are in the form of upgrades you can purchase from little alien vending machines with the currency dropped by the enemies, like you could buy 10% protection or 10% damage, while some come in the form of parasites Celine attaches to her suit, but those come with disadvantages. For example, you can run faster, but now you suffer fall damage. Or you can dodge more often, but the enemy leaves behind pools of acid when they die that can damage you. Most of these upgrades did not even sound good on paper to me, so I ignored them safely. One thing these alien parasites don't understand is the strength of a good sales pitch.
A, B, C. A always B, B, C closing. Always be closing. Always be closing. A guy don't walk on the lot lest he wants to buy. sitting out there waiting to give you their...
Increase cooldown by 5 seconds.
You're so rich. How come you're coming down here and waste your time with such a bunch of bums? You see this watch? You see this watch? Yeah. That watch costs more than your car. I made $970,000 last year. How much you make?
Something that you need to be okay with in order to enjoy this game are stories that are open to interpretation. I'm going to do my best to explain, but this is where we're going to enter spoiler territory. If you want to avoid, skip to... Alright, so it's not too long before the whole coming back to life at the crash site thing is not the strangest thing about this planet. Celine keeps seeing bits and pieces of her past here. These can be items that appear as beneficial upgrades or entire structures Celine recognizes. My personal favorite is the old house you find. On every run, somewhere, there is a 20th century house. Celine recognizes the house immediately and comments on how this is impossible. Sometimes you can enter the house for a fun cutscene that ultimately gives you more questions than answers. You keep getting bits and pieces that slowly start to connect with one another. Celine had a son that something happened to. The ship she's piloting in the beginning is actually named after him, Helios, which is not a stupid name at all. It seems that Celine spent a lot of time away from home, but is also crazy or something. There were not one, but 2 car accidents in Celine's past that the game keeps referencing interchangeably with each other. Celine's mother also somehow has a role in this because she was not able to become an astronaut like she wanted to be from one of these car accidents. Eventually, you get a flashback of someone who looks like Celine getting into a car accident with a child in the back seat. But this version of Celine doesn't have 2 different colored eyes, which means Celine could be the child in the back seat, or she's the mother driving the car as an adult, but before she got heliochromia. There are audio logs that hint at her being denied being able to join the space program, which contradicts Celine even being here. There seems to be some kind of old-style astronaut following Celine, even in-game if you're observant enough. The audio logs you find seem to be getting more and more insane, talking of ascending to the top of the mountain like the extinct race of alien before that used to inhabit this place, and then just as quickly switching to talking about dissension and going deeper and deeper underwater. When you get the first ending, it actually shows Celine leaving the planet and living out her life in a montage, only to be brought right back to the planet after dying of old age. This was the moment I decided I was going to do everything I could in the game to get answers. Which, some I did get, but ultimately, this is a game I think where everyone is going to interpret what happens in the story a little differently. And I believe this is by design. During an interview with PushSquare.com, Returnal's director Harry Kruger had this to say.
The narrative itself has been designed around haunting the player. We want questions to be lingering inside your mind, hopefully even after the credits roll, where you'll be wondering certain things and interpreting them in different ways. It's definitely a game designed around mystery.
Nowadays, we live in an information era where it doesn't take long for every new piece of media to be dissected down to the very intention of the creators themselves. After I got all the game's endings, I started digging through forum posts and YouTube videos of people explaining the story, and I can tell you, at least at the time of recording this, there are no answers to any of the really big questions. And this is my only real problem with Returnal. I think it's really cool to leave certain elements of a narrative open to interpretation. In fact, it makes certain stories so much more interesting to talk about with friends right afterwards, so you can work together to piece the story together like a mystery. The problem is that you never get that big oh moment where it all makes sense. To the best of my knowledge, I'm pretty sure Celine is a completely insane person locked in a padded cell in some government facility running and invincibility frame dodging all day and night. And until the developers decide to make a sequel or some kind of additional content, that's what I'm going to believe. But wait! A free DLC is exactly what Housemarque gave us a year after the game's release. The Ascension DLC gave players access to co-op and a new endless challenge mode called Tower of Sisyphus. This endless challenge mode includes about 45 minutes of additional cutscenes. And I can tell you, I'm going to be enjoying getting answers with more questions over at twitch.tv/poopbro420. An endless challenge mode fits Returnal's arcade style of gameplay perfectly, and I wouldn't be surprised if Housemarque continues to release even more content for the game, but they have said recently that they're already working on their next game that will utilize ideas and narrative systems left on Returnal's cutting room floor. And I can't wait to see whatever the hell that means. Returnal has been Housemarque's first major step into the AAA market. They've now established themselves as a trustworthy exclusive developer for Sony. It's incredible to see something that's so unique while being distinctly old school at the same time. It's not often that you see huge companies take risks on games, but that's what this is. Housemarque and Sony took a risk, and I say it paid off. Celine's adventure on Atropos is something I can confidently recommend to anyone that has a PlayStation 5. It's extremely worth your time, and only became more accessible when they added co-op. So what are you waiting for? Grab your audio recorder, get a friend if you have one, and treat yourself to the greatest experience available right now on the PlayStation 5. Obviously, until the God of War himself, Sonic the Hedgehog, gives us Sonic Frontiers later this year. Let's go, boys! Woo!